Your leadership success is determined by how well you lead yourself first, to then effectively influence people, organizational, and market results. To lead yourself well is to recognize that you exist in a 360 reality, where you absolutely must prioritize both your personal and professional well-being so that you can lead others from a place of balance, boundaries, and abundance. I'm Modesta Mahiga, and this is the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast, where I share insights, strategies, and guest stories that'll absolutely transform your work and life as a 360 leader.
You've often heard it said, you cannot give what you don't have. And the Bible in Matthew 22:39 says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Which tells me that you can only treat others as well as you treat yourself. Today on the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast, we're talking about self-leadership with the premise that you cannot lead others any better than you lead yourself. My name is Modesta Mahiga. I am joined on this episode on self-leadership by Mhando Mbughuni. Welcome, Mhando.
Thank you.
I want to share a little bit about Mhando. Mhando Mbughuni is a global communications and public affairs specialist with 15 plus years of experience synthesizing complex policy and organizational priorities into strategies and services that deliver triple bottom line value. He brings rich, multidisciplinary approaches drawn from the private sector financial services industry, political and economic affairs at the United Nations headquarters in New York, as well as small business and nonprofit consulting, both in the US and in Africa. As a senior consultant in project management, Mhando is sought after for designing, developing, and deploying multifunctional organizational strategy and multi-stakeholder communication solutions that increase client visibility, credibility, and performance, thereby distinguishing them from other players in their fields. Mhando holds a dual Master in Global Public Policy and Management from New York University and University College London, and a Bachelor of Business Administration with a concentration in marketing from Mzumbe University. Welcome, Mhando.
Thank you.
I'm so thrilled to have you here because I know you personally, and I know that self-leadership is a very prominent feature of your life and the way you approach things. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like you to please give us a brief definition, your definition of self-leadership. What is self-leadership?
I see self-leadership as the personal discipline or personal habits that one has to lead themselves in different aspects of their lives. You were talking about spiritual, mental, professional, and many other areas of our lives. And so when we're able to create certain habits that help us to improve ourselves in those different aspects, that to me is self-leadership.
So good. And truly, because we're all about 360 growth, right? The personal and the professional, it is so key that self-leadership isn't just about one area, but it encompasses several. Now, taking it to an organizational perspective, how does a leader's self-leadership affect culture, performance, and even organizational results?
Because when you talk about, for example, an organization, it's created by people. Mm-hmm. It's a combination of different people with different skills and abilities, and they come together and put together their competences and the skills and the abilities to forge one thing, like to achieve organizational vision or to attain certain organizational goals. And so when it comes to self-leadership, for example, the impact that every person has into that, it means the extent to which every person improve themselves, the extent every person push themselves to certain limits in the way they use their gifts and talents and skills, then that will have direct impact into the whole organization, because everybody has a part to play in achieving the overall objective of that organization or a corporate objectives.
You know, I really love your response, because here I was actually when I crafted this question, I was thinking, how does the leader at the top, right? How does their self-leadership affect culture and performance and results? But your response is absolutely where leadership and organizational development is in our context in this century right now, in that it's not about that triangle where the leadership is at the apex. It's often horizontal, and effectiveness of an organization, right? The results of an organization are no longer seen to be on the shoulders of just the person who's sitting on the leadership seat. It's everybody and their own self-leadership that then contributes to the organization's success. And I love you responding that way, because before the times we're in, we would point at the leader. You tell us what to do, you measure us, and of course, anything doesn't go well, it's on the leader. They didn't really stand up with the team. Things that go well, you know, they're always shared. But this changes perspective. So what does this then say to each individual in a team? You know, this notion that how well you lead yourself will determine how you're going to show up at work, will determine how the rest of the department or organization performs. What do you think this should speak to the individual who shows up at work, and many times maybe thinks that, well, it's our teamwork or it's the leader's responsibility? How does that change a person and their contribution to an organization now?
I think it all comes down to system thinking. Mm-hmm. That a system is not just a thing as a whole, but it's made by different parts, and every part in that system has a role to play. So for example, if you look at the metaphor of our bodies, every part of our body has its specific role to play to make sure that our bodies function the way they were designed to function. And so when we look at ourselves in that perspective, that we are in the system and we are part of the system, and if we are one of the components in that system and we do not play our part as we should, then in one way or another, the performance of that system would somehow be impeded, or it may crash altogether. And so it may not be easy or conventional view to think that we play a huge role in an organization as one person, but the reality is we do, especially if we do not, we're not in a position to be the best versions of ourselves in terms of investing in our skills and in our competences, and becoming the parts that play the roles that we're supposed to play at optimal capacity, then definitely we will cause harm in the system that we're in.
You know, and now that you're bringing, you know, this whole systemic perspective to self-leadership, I'd like now to turn it to the organizational leadership and the organizational system to say, okay, before we thought, okay, leadership is really about the leader at the apex, at the top. Now we understand each contributor really is a leader of themselves, and their contribution really makes a difference to the rest of the organization. Now, to take it to 360 leadership specifically, we're in an era where we're talking about wellness, we're talking about mental health and emotional health, etc., right? And even physical health, and how important it is to somebody's ability to produce, their productivity, their contribution, etc. Now, what advice, if we could say that, would you give to organizations who maybe in previous times would have said, look, your personal life is your personal life. We need you to show up. We need you, you're going to show up on time. You're going to do your work. You're going to do it well, etc. How do organizations need to rethink leadership and rethink maybe even human resource development, right? In the light that a person is 360 and their personal lives do not remain at home, they show up at work and they affect how they perform. If there's any advice you would give, what would it be?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest thing that organizations need to realize is that people are not machines. They are creatures with emotions. They're creatures with instincts, and they have mental capacity to perform whatever they need to perform, and they acquired skills and all of that. So when it comes to the combination of all of those things, it's very important for the organizations to try to make sure that they have the culture of cultivating their people in all those areas, not just to expect people to come and show up for work, but you find some people having mental health issues because of stress, work-related stress. Others, they do have family problems and all of that. And one would argue that those are personal issues and they have nothing to do with work. But there has to be an environment, because the reality is, but at the end of the day, if this person comes to work, they will show up anyway. But there's a difference between a person who finds a safe environment to be, especially when it comes to how is that environment motivates them to aspire for more. Are they motivated to strive to achieve the organizational goals and vision, or is it the kind of environment where they just have to do the bare minimum because they just have to show up for work? And it's up to the organizations to create that environment where people will aspire not only to do what they need to do, but where they can even go above and beyond. They can own the organization's vision because they feel the kind of belonging in there. And simply because there's a recognition that we see you, and we know that you're not just a worker, but you are a human being, and you're not just here to work for organizations' objectives, but you're also here to achieve, or to the organization is here to make sure to see that you achieve your dreams.
So good. I recently consulted for the Econet group in Zimbabwe, and I got to speak to senior executive team, the group, and we're talking about 360 leadership, and when we we were talking about how each person comes in the context of being a 360 leader: the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, personal, professional, relational, financial, leadership, impact. Is about 10 areas that make up a 360 leader, but each person comes in that context. Each person has a personal life that can impact their professional. Each person has personal aspirations, like you were saying, their dreams, and they expect to fulfill them as they are fulfilling the vision of the organization. Each person has financial, so as far as they're able to store their finances, etc., their health. It really impacts who is showing up at work and how they're showing up and how they're able to deliver. And the head of the group, he just said, this is a conversation, this is a serious conversation that we have to have, because we're sitting here and we're thinking as executives, we are 360 leaders. Let's be mindful of the different areas of our lives and how they impact how we lead. But now that you brought it out, like you said, horizontally, everyone is a 360 leader. Everybody should be able to lead self well. Well, we need to make sure that we give them, we equip our people and we institute programs that help them grow 360. Otherwise, we're getting shells of people showing up, because we're not factoring in, and it's not traditional for organizations to factor in everything else that's going with other people and how they can be a support. Now, I know that can look different for different organizations. I wanted to ask you, now going back to a leader, which now is each person, because self-leadership is a concern for each person. What strategies or systems can you recommend for leaders to prioritize self-leadership when organizations and cultures actually expect them to focus on leading others, right? And their professional leadership development. So what then would you recommend that they do to prioritize self-leadership? Because we started with the premise that you cannot lead others any better than you lead yourself.
Right. Well, that question reminds me of the Bible verse. It's Proverbs, I think, 25:28, which says, a man without self-control it's like a city without walls.
Ooh.
And when it comes to that, I think one of the things to help us to create strategies for self-leadership, first of all, from my personal experience, is to cultivate personal habits. To me, these are like rituals. For example, to make sure how many hours of sleep I get. It comes down to those little details of life. It's not just like a huge change, like a New Year resolution. It all comes down to little details of life. For example, how many hours you sleep? Are you eating well? What kind of information are you consuming from social media, from whatever surrounding you? What books are you reading? What kind of music are you listening to? Because all those things, they feed into your mind, and eventually they would shape how you think, and they would shape your decisions, and they will end up shaping your life. Yeah, they will create they will shape how you live. And so those habits, to me, they're very important. Do you, for example, how many hours or minutes at least do you spend with God as your time alone to pray, to read the Word for those who believe in Christ, and how much time you use for meditation, for example. And then I also believe that another strategy is to assess yourself. It's like a personal strategic view of what are my strengths, and how can I cultivate the areas of my strengths, and how can I integrate them into my day-to-day activities. Are you good with numbers, or are you creative? What area that you feel like this is my area, and how can you integrate that into your daily life, and how can you even improve in those areas to become a person of authority when it comes to that. And last but not least, I think we have to be in a position where we're surrounded by people who we can ask about different perspectives of life, because we have limited knowledge. We don't know all things, and sometimes we can see our lives and we can see our environment in a certain way, but some people can give us a bird's eye view of what's going on, and people who can even keep us accountable, people who can help us get back in line. And so we need to surround ourselves with people, because self-leadership is not just about what you can do to change yourself, but it's also about how you can respond, and how you're humble enough to accept corrections, to accept, to learn, to be teachable in order to improve. Because without it, we will become, as the Bible says, wise in our own eyes. And I think that would not be a way to go.
Oh, Mhando, this has been so rich. Really, my last question would be, imagine a leader, right? So the 360 Leadership Podcast is for leaders. Imagine a leader that has not heard this perspective before, that you can only lead others as well as you lead yourself, simply because culture said a leader goes out and you're governing other people, you're managing, stewarding other people. And they would like to take the first step to starting on a self-leadership journey. What would you say that first step is, if there's a thing that they would do?
Well, the first step I would say would be one of the points that I mentioned is to take a stock of your life, to see what are my gifts.
What does that look like, by the way? What do they actually in action physically do to take stock of their lives? What should they do?
The first thing is to set aside time to just sit down and do nothing, but reflect. Where I came from so far, and where am I going? And if possible, to have a journal and to write down where do I want to be in the next 5 years or 10 years, and or to see some people are going through identity crisis. Who am I? So different people are in different stages of life, but whatever stage you are, we live in a very busy world right now, and we have a lot of distractions with digital technology, social media, and all of that. And so it's easy to get distracted and to keep on going on and on and on and on without having time to pause and reflect. And so my advice, as a practical next step, would be to tell yourself, stop and reflect.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the starting point where we can start seeing what are my areas of my strengths, and where do I want to go, and how can I position myself, and things like that.
So good, Mhando. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. What a topic, self-leadership. Now, Mhando, the community, the 360 leadership community, let's say somebody's thinking, I want to hear more from him. I want to have a conversation with Mhando. Where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn.
So there you have it, folks. Straight from Mhando Mbughuni. To start leading self well, take time to reflect on where you are, where you've come from, where you would like to go, discovering your strengths and looking at areas where you can get support. I really loved it, Mhando, when you talked about getting other people to support you. In Modesta Mahiga LLC, that brings you the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership, we speak about getting support from mentors and coaches and counselors, therapists, etc. So it's so key to also take stock of those relationships, those people around you that can help you grow. So I'm going to leave you with this coaching question. When you take time to reflect, ask yourself, what do I need to start doing to help me become more effective in self-leadership? And what do I need to stop doing to help me become more effective in self-leadership? Until the next episode, my name is Modesta Mahiga, and this is the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast. Bye.
The Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast releases on the first Saturday of every month. Thank you to all the amazing people that have already subscribed. We're growing in our rankings in leadership and business globally. Please do share episodes with other people in your community. When you share them on social media, make sure to tag a Modesta Mahiga across all platforms, and we'll give you a shout out in the next episode. Remember this today. You're only one person with finite time, energy, and resources. Take care of yourself and your leadership results by focusing your attention on what you must do, and learn to turn down or to leverage your support system for everything else. That's 360 Leadership. And this is the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast.